Leave her, the Shield Lord said, already running. The deck is lost. She is lost. Anyone who stays dies with her. He said it to me because I was the one not moving. The observation deck of the Hollow Crown lurched under a hit somewhere 2 decks down, and the long curved window above us flexed like water before it held. I had both hands locked on a coolant valve the size of a wagon wheel, and I did not let go of it to watch 11 of the most decorated guards in the Serethi throne fleet pour out through the blast door in their gold. Chased armor, helmets already sealed, boots already gone. The door cycled shut behind the last of them. The seal light went from white to a slow pulsing amber that meant the lock had no power left to hold it, and it would open again the moment the next concussion shook it. I was a station keeper. I fixed the things that broke on the parts of the barge nobody important ever walked through. The scrubbers, the trunk lines, the coolant spine that ran the whole length of the ship like a backbone. I was 38 years old, the only human in a fleet of 40,000 Serethi, and I had taken the contract because it paid, and because a man with a quiet history likes a quiet job. Nobody on the Hollow Crown had spoken to me in 9 months that wasn't an order or a complaint about the heat in the lower galleries. And now the whole bridge crew was gone, the guard was gone, and the woman they had all just abandoned was lying 20 feet from me against the base of her own throne, and she was looking at me. I knew who she was. Everyone in 3 systems knew who she was. Aelith Valoran, Empress Regent of the Serethi, the one who had held the border worlds together for 19 years with treaties and threats and a court full of men who smiled and counted the days until she was weak enough to take. The Kale had come to make her weak. Their fleet had broken her escort over the dead moon at the system's edge 8 hours ago, and they had been chewing their way inward ever since, and now they were chewing on the flagship itself. She was not the painting. The painting in the Accord Hall showed her tall and cold and crowned, blue-gray skin like polished slate, a queen carved out of winter. The woman against the throne had half her ceremonial collar torn away and a long burn across her left cheekbone and a wet, dark stain spreading down the side of her gown from a wound I could already tell was bad. One of her eyes was swollen shut where shrapnel had opened her brow. The other eye, the good one, deep gold, was fixed on me with the flat, ready calm of someone who had already decided how she was going to die and was only waiting to see whether I would make it harder. "You should go," she said. Her voice was steady. That surprised me more than anything. "There is no honor in this. There is no reward. My Shield Lord was right. The deck is lost." I cranked the valve another quarter turn. The hiss behind the bulkhead dropped half a tone, and the temperature gauge on my forearm panel slid back from red toward orange. I had just bought the deck maybe 9 minutes before the coolant spine ruptured and cooked everything in this section. 9 minutes was not nothing. 9 minutes was a lot if you knew what to do with it. "I'm not staying for honor," I said. "I'm staying because that valve is mine. And if I leave it open, this whole section goes up. And there are people on the deck below us who haven't gone anywhere either." It wasn't entirely the truth, but it was true enough to say out loud, and it had the advantage of giving her something to argue with that wasn't her own dying. She studied me with the one gold eye. Outside the great window, a Kale boarding sloop slid across the stars, close enough that I could see the gun crews on its hull, and then a battery somewhere on the Hollow Crown's flank caught it, and it came apart in a silent white bloom. The light of it washed across her ruined face, and for half a second she looked almost young. "You are the human," she said. "The one in the lower lines. Vantry, Cole Vantry. I signed your contract." A thread of something that was almost dark amusement moved under the pain. "I sign every contract. I have never read one. I do not know what you do." "Right now," I said, "I keep your ship from killing you before the Kale get the chance." The deck heaved again. The amber seal light on the blast door went dark, and the door shuttered a hand's width open on a wedge of red emergency glow from the corridor. Beyond and through that wedge I heard, far off and getting closer, the particular flat clatter of Kale assault frames moving in step. They had breached, they were in the spine corridors, they were coming up. I let go of the valve. It would hold now for a few minutes on its own. I crossed to her, and I went down on one knee beside the throne. Not the way a subject kneels, but the way a medic kneels, low and fast and close. And I looked at the wound in her side, and my stomach dropped because I had seen wounds like it before, in another life I did not talk about, and I knew exactly how much time it bought a person. Not 9 minutes. Not if she moved. Maybe an hour if she didn't, and we did not have an hour, and we could not stay where we were. "I'm going to put my hand on this," I told her. "I'm not asking permission. It's going to hurt, and then it's going to hurt less. Do you understand me?" Her good eye flicked to my face. I think no one had told the Empress Regent of the Serethi what was going to happen to her without asking in a very long time. "You presume," she said quietly. "I do," I said, and I pressed the heel of my hand against the wound hard, and felt her whole body go rigid, and heard the breath leave her in a thin, controlled hiss that she would not let become a cry. She did not cry out. She closed her good eye, and she let me do it, and the only sign of what it cost her was the way her clawed fingers found the gilded armrest of her own throne and dug in until the gold leaf peeled. "Field dressing's in my kit," I said. "Left hip, reach it." And the Empress Regent of the Serethi, who had not in 19 years bent to take anything from anyone, reached across her own body with a shaking hand and pulled the pack off my belt and pressed it into my palm. That was the first time she chose. She did not know it yet, neither did I, but that was the first one. The assault frames in the corridor were close now. I could feel them through the deck plate, the synchronized stamp of 40 legs, the sound a wall makes when it is about to become a door. The breech light over the failing blast seal pulsed faster. I got the dressing into the wound and bound it tight, and I got my arm under her shoulders, and I said the thing I would say 100 more times before that night was over, the thing that was the only promise I had any right to make. "I won't leave you here. Wherever this goes, you're not going alone. Now hold on to me." She turned her head. The gold eye found mine in the red light, and something in it shifted. Not gratitude, not yet. Something harder and more careful than gratitude. Recognition that I was a fact she had not planned for. "Why?" she said. Not a plea, a question flat and real. The way you'd ask a machine why it was still running after the power was cut. "Because nobody else did," I said. "That's the whole reason. There isn't a better one." The blast door blew inward off its frame. I had her behind the throne before the door finished falling. The throne was a slab of cast ring steel under all the gold, and it was the only thing on that deck that would stop a kale slug, and I had moved her the second I heard the charge hiss. 2 boarders came through the smoking gap in their gray assault frames, weapons up, scanning. They were not built like the Serethi. The Serethi were tall and fine-boned and proud. The Kale were squat and armored and bred for exactly this, for the inside of a ship, for the kill in the corridor, and the lead one swung its weapon toward the throne and saw the blood trail across the deck and knew exactly what it meant. "There," it said, in the flat-traded speech the boarder used. "The hen is down. Take the head. The fleet pays for the head. The fleet pays for the head." So that was the price on her. They were not here to win a war. They were here to collect her skull and end a dynasty and let the border worlds fall to whoever moved first into the gap. 19 years of her holding the line, and it came down to a bounty paid by weight. I had a cutting bar and a pressure wrench and 30 years of being underestimated. I came around the low side of the throne while the lead frame was still talking. Because a thing that talks is a thing that is not yet shooting, and I put the cutting bar through the gap under its arm, where the assault frame's plating left the actuator exposed. I knew where it was exposed, because I fix machines, and a Kale warframe is just a machine that hates you. The bar went in, and the arm went dead, and the weapon clattered to the deck, and I had it before the second frame understood that its partner had stopped being a problem. I am not a soldier. I want that clear. I was a soldier once, in the part of my life I left in a drawer, and I was never a good one, only a careful one, and careful is what keeps you breathing when the fast ones are already dead. I did not fight the second frame. I shot it twice with its partner's own weapon in the seam at the throat where I would have put a wrench, and it went down and did not get up. The deck was quiet for exactly as long as it takes to reload. "Vantry," her voice low behind the throne. I went back to her. She had dragged herself up against the ring steel slab, both hands pressed to the dressing, and her good eye was tracking me with a new and unwelcome clarity. "There will be more. There are always more. You have killed 2 of 1,000. Then I'll kill the 3rd one when it gets here," I said, "and worry about the rest after. That is not a plan." "No," I admitted. "It's a job. I do the next thing that's broken. Right now, you're the thing that's broken, and the floor is. And the 3rd Kale will be in a minute. One at a time." She laughed. It was a terrible sound, wet and short, and it folded into a cough that brought a dark line to the corner of her mouth, and she pressed the back of her wrist against it and looked at the smear there with the detached interest of someone reading a clock. "One at a time," she repeated. 19 years I have done this work, one thing at a time. No one ever." She stopped, started again harder, like she was angry at her own voice for wandering. "No one ever does the next thing for me. They do it for the throne, for the fleet, for what they will be owed when I am gone. You do not even know what you are owed." "Nothing," I said. I was looking at the corridor. "I'm owed nothing. That's not why." "Then for the love of your own life, human, tell me why." "Because I have spent 19 years learning to read why off the faces of men, and I cannot read yours. And it is the most frightening thing on this ship." I didn't have a clean answer. I had a true one, and the true one was small, and I gave it to her because I was too tired to dress it up. "A long time ago," I said, "I was somewhere I was supposed to hold, and everybody else ran, and I ran too. And the person I left behind didn't make it. I've had a long time to think about whether I'd run again. I checked the weapon's charge. Turns out I won't. That's all it is. It's not about you being a queen. I'd have stayed for the cook. She went very still. The gold eye held me, unblinking, and I had the strange sense of being weighed on a scale that had measured emperors. You would have stayed for the cook, she said softly. I would. That, she said, is the only thing anyone has said to me in 19 years that I believe completely. Down the corridor, the synchronized stamp again. Closer. More of them this time, 6, 8, hard to tell. And under it, a deeper vibration coming up through the deck, a grinding I felt in my teeth, which was the hollow crown beginning to come apart along the coolant spine I had bought 9 minutes for. 9 minutes that were mostly spent. I made the call. We could not hold the deck. We could not run in the open. But I knew this ship the way the Shield Lord and the bridge crew never had, because they walked the gold corridors and I walked the spine. And the spine had a maintenance chase that ran behind the observation deck's window, walled, dark and tight and forgotten, all the way aft to the emergency boat bays the gentry never used. Can you move? I said. If I carry you. I can do anything, the Empress Regent said, for as long as I have to. That is the entire skill of being a queen. Good. I got my arm under her again, because I'm about to ask you to do something undignified and I need you to not die of it. Undignified. Her good eye glinted, and for one impossible second, there was something in her ruined face that was almost a smile. The first real one, fierce and dry and very much alive. You may be the first person in the Empire who has ever worried about my dignity instead of using it. I pulled the access panel off the wall, and the dark mouth of the maintenance chase breathed cold metal at us, and the assault frames hit the broken blast door at the far end of the deck. And I lifted her, and we went into the dark. But the dark was not empty, and I had not crawled 3 body lengths before the chase taught me what it was going to cost. A coolant manifold had ruptured somewhere ahead during the fighting, and the chase took a hard bend around it where the pipe ran hot enough to raise. Blisters, and I had to flatten us both against the cold side and inch past it with the heat licking the back of my neck. Elith made no sound, but I felt her flinch when the radiant heat found the burn on her cheek, and I shifted her higher against my chest so my shoulder took it instead. We got past. The metal had left a long red wheal across my forearm that I would not notice for hours. You do not notice that kind of thing while it is happening. You only notice it later, when it is safe enough to hurt. You moved me, she said, against my ear. To take the heat yourself, you did it without thinking. I did it because the burn on your face is fresh and mine isn't. That's all. It's triage. You take the hit where it does the least damage. You speak of my face as a damage report. Right now it is 1. I hauled us another length. Later it can be a face again. Later you can be a queen, and I can be a man who shouldn't have touched you. Right now you're a patient and a load and a thing I'm getting to a boat. It's easier that way. For both of us. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, very low, it is not easier, you only say it is. I have watched you do 3 impossible things tonight in the voice of a man. Reading a maintenance log, and I have begun to understand that the flat voice is not because you feel nothing. It is because you feel too much, and the flat voice is the valve you crank to keep the spine from rupturing. I know that valve, Cole. I have one of my own. I have used it for 19 years. I didn't answer her, because she was right, and because the second wave hit the deck behind us. I heard them come through the broken blast door, not 2 this time, a half dozen at least, the synchronized stamp filling the observation deck we had just left. And I heard the lead frame's vox crackle as it found the resealed panel I had come through, and I heard it say in the flat-traded speech the word that meant pursue, and I knew the math had just gotten worse. They had found the chase. They would not all fit, but they would send what fit, and what fit would come fast and angry and unburdened by a wounded body. Faster, Aelith breathed. No, I said, steady. Fast is how you wedge yourself at the next junction and die in a pipe. Steady is how you get there. I crawl this every month. They've crawled it once, in the dark, behind us. The chase is mine, let it be mine. I meant it as cold comfort, but it was also a plan. 40 meters of chase that I had mapped with my own hands against a warframe that had to learn it under fire. That was the most even fight I was going to get all night, and I intended to spend every foot of my advantage. At the next junction, I stopped, braced her against the wall, and reached up into the dark to a junction box I knew by feel, and I pulled the local coolant bleed and cracked it a quarter turn. A jet of superheated vapor hissed out across the chase behind us at chest height, filling the pipe with scalding fog, and I heard the lead pursuer hit it and stall and start backing its mates up, and that bought us a junction, maybe 2. It was the kind of thing you can only do if you have spent a year learning where every valve in the dark lives. The Shield Lord could not have done it. The bridge crew could not have done it. The man no one counted could, because counting the valves and corridors no one walks had been his whole quiet job. What'd you do, she said. Cook the air behind us. It'll clear in 90 seconds. We need to be at the bend by then. I got my arm back under her. This is the part where you do the undignified thing again. Hold your breath when I say, there's going to be a stretch where the air isn't good. I have held my breath through worse rooms than this, the Empress Regent said, though none of them had better company. Go. We went. We made the bend ahead of the clearing fog, and behind us the pursuers came on again, slower now, wary of the dark and the heat and the human who kept turning their own ship into a weapon. I could hear one of them counting junctions in the traded speech, a low mechanical drone, and I realized it was tracked me by the valves I tripped. Learning my method, and I made a note to stop tripping valves and start simply moving, because a clever enemy who learns your pattern is more dangerous than a fast one who doesn't. I changed the pattern. I went silent, no valves, no tricks, just the long, steady haul through the dark with a queen against my chest and her blood warm in my sleeve. And the drone behind us lost the threat of me. And for a while the only sound was breath and the slither of two bodies dragging through a metal pipe toward a single seam of light a long way off. Tell me something true, she said suddenly in the dark, while we cannot be overheard by anyone who counts. Tell me something true that you would not say in the light. I knew what she was doing. She was keeping herself conscious by keeping me talking, and she was keeping me steady by giving me something to do with the part of my mind that wanted to listen for the drone. It was a soldier's trick and a queen's trick at once, and I let her use it on me, because it worked. All right, I said, here's one. When the Shield Lord said leave her, the deck is lost, for about half a second I thought about it. I thought about the boat and my contract and the long quiet life I'd planned, and I did the math everyone else did. I'm not a saint, Aelith. I did the same arithmetic they all did. The only difference between me and your court is that I did it and then I did the other thing anyway. The staying isn't because I didn't feel the running. It's because I felt the running and stayed on top of it. That's the whole of it. There's no better man underneath. There's just a man who decided in a corridor a long time ago what kind of arithmetic he was going to refuse to finish. In the dark, her clawed hand found my collar and held it, the way it would hold it through the bend ahead and the boat bay after. That, she said, is the truest thing anyone has ever told me about courage. It is not the absence of the running. It is the staying on top of it. I have ruled for 19 years and I learned it tonight in a pipe from a man who refuses to be a saint. A breath. Keep crawling, Cole. We are nearly there. And do not stop telling me true things. I find I have a great hunger for them, and I have been starved a very long time. The chase was 30 inches wide and pitch black, except for the green crawl lights every 20 feet, and it stank of hot coolant and ozone, and it was the only safe place on the ship, which tells you everything about that night. I went first, backward, with her against my chest and my arms hooked under hers, dragging us both along by my heels. She weighed less than I expected. Serethi bones are light, built for worlds with thinner gravity than the one I was born on, and that was the only thing about the situation that worked in my favor. Behind us, far enough back now that the sound came muffled through the panel I had resealed, the kale frames were tearing the observation deck apart, looking for the body that wasn't there. They will find the panel, she breathed. Her mouth was close to my ear. She had to keep it there. It was the only way to be heard. They are slow, but they are thorough. They will follow. I know. That's why we're not stopping at the first bay. We're going to the far one. The far one is 40 meters, 41. I've crawled it. It's a bad 41 meters, and then it's a boat. She was quiet for the length of one crawl light, and then she said in a different voice, lower, you crawled it. When? Every month, maintenance cycle. Nobody else does it. I hauled us another body length. The chase, the spine, the bilges under the throne room. I've had my hands on every part of this ship that you've never seen. I know it the way you know your court. Better. Probably. Your court runs when it's hit. The ship just breaks where I know it'll break. That is, she stopped, coughed, wet, controlled. When she spoke again, I could hear that the words were costing her more than the crawl. That is a thing I should have understood 19 years ago. The ones who run the corridors no one walks are the ones who are still there when the corridors fill with fire. Save it, I said, not unkindly. Talk less, breathe more, we're a third of the way. But she didn't save it. I think she couldn't. I think there is a thing that happens to people who have been alone at the top for a very long time when someone finally does a small true thing for them and asks for nothing back. A kind of dam breaks quietly, in the dark where no one can see it, and use it against them. She talked. In broken pieces between the crawl lights, with her mouth at my ear and her blood soaking warm through the dressing into my sleeve, the Empress Regent of the Serethi told a maintenance worker things she had told no one. She told me her Shield Lord had been her father's man, and her grandfather's, and that she had known for 3 years he was waiting for her to die, and had let him stay close because a knife you can see is safer than one you cannot. She told me the kale bounty on her head had been raised twice this year by someone inside her own court, and that she did not yet know who, and that she had stopped expecting to live long enough to find out. She told me she had married once, young, before the Regency, and that he had been a good and gentle man who was killed in a border raid that she had later learned was meant for her, and that she had not let herself be carried by anyone, not lifted, not held. Not since they had carried his body past her, because the next set of arms around her would want something. They always wanted something. And she had decided it was easier to need nothing than to be owed. And here you are, she said, an arm around me that wants nothing. I do not know what to do with it. I am the most powerful woman in 4 systems, and I do not know what to do with one honest arm. You don't have to do anything with it, I said. That's the whole point of it now. Quiet, we're at the bend. This part's tight. The bend was where the chase squeezed past the coolant spine's main junction, a hot black gap barely wider than my shoulders, and I had to turn her, and turning her hurt her, and she made the thin hiss again and gripped a fistful of my collar and did not cry out, and we got through it. On the far side, the green light was steadier, and I could see her face for the first time since the deck, and it was gray under the slate blue, and her good eye was glassy, and I knew I was running out of the hour the wound had given me. Stay with me, I said. Aelith, stay with me. I had never said her name. No one I had ever met would have dared use the name without the title. It came out of me plain and human, the way you say the name of someone you are not going to let go of, and her good eyes snapped back into focus at the sound of it like a line pulled, taut. You said my name, she whispered. Was that wrong? No, her clawed hand tightened on my collar and held there, not gripping for balance now, but gripping on purpose. No, say it again. It has been a long time since anyone said it as though I were a person who might answer, and not a throne that might fall. Aelith, I said. We're 19 meters from a boat. Stay with me and I'll have you off this ship 4 minutes. Cole. She said mine back. It was the first time, and she said it carefully, like a word in a language she was learning and meant to keep. If I do not, if the 4 minutes are too many, they won't be. If they are, she said, with the iron calm of a woman who has planned every death, but this one, I want it on a record somewhere, even if the only record is a maintenance worker's memory, that at the end the one who stayed was the one no one counted. Write that down somewhere, Cole Vantry. The ones you don't count are the ones who don't run. Tell me yourself, I said, and I started crawling again hard, dragging us both toward the dark seam of light at the chase's end where the emergency bay waited. Tell me yourself in 10 years. I'm not writing your epitaph in a coolant chase. Move. And behind us, distant, the panel I had sealed gave way with a shriek of torn metal, and the crawl lights threw the first long shadows of the assault frames into the mouth of the chase. The frames behind us were not the only ones thinking. I had been so focused on the chase behind that I almost missed the sound ahead. A scrape, metal on metal, come from the dark in front of us, between us and the boat. I froze. Aelith felt me freeze and went still against my chest, and in the silence we both heard it. Something moving in the chase ahead, coming toward us from the direction of the bays. They flanked, she breathed. There is a second access from the starboard bays. They sent one around. One. The chase was too tight for more than one to come the other way, and a clever Kale commander had peeled a single frame off and sent it the long way. Round to meet us coming, to catch the queen between the hammer and the wall. It was good thinking. It was exactly what I would have done. And it meant that somewhere in the dark ahead, between me and the only boat that mattered, a warframe was crawling toward us with its weapon folded against its chest and the bounty in its head. I had a cutting bar and a stolen Kale weapon and a wounded queen and no room to swing either. Cole, she whispered, you cannot fight it in the pipe. There is no room. It will fire the moment it has a target, and the target will be me, behind you. If you rise to meet it, you will take the shot meant for me, and then it will have us both. I know. My mind was running ahead, down the map of the chase I carried in my hands. I know, there's a junction, 10 meters ahead. The spine cross vault, the chase opens out where it crosses the main coolant junction just for a body length, enough to stand half up. That's where it'll want to take me, in the open bit. That's the only place it can bring the weapon to bear. I was already moving us forward, toward the danger, because the only way past a thing in a pipe is through the one place wide enough to fight it. So that's where I'll take it. Aelith, when I let go of you, you press flat into the low side of the vault, behind the junction housing, ring steel. It'll stop a slug. You make yourself small, and you do not look up no matter what you hear. Can you do that? I can do anything, she said, the same words from the deck, for as long as I have to. Go. But Cole, her clawed hand caught my collar one more time. If it goes wrong. If I am between the hammer and the wall, after all. Do not spend yourself buying me a minute I cannot use. Promise me that much. A dead man cannot carry me to a boat. I'm not going to die in a coolant chase, I said. I told you, I've got plans. Press flat. Here it comes. We reached the cross vault as the frame did. It rose into the wider dark from the far side, a grady bulk unfolding, and its weapon came up out of its fold. And for 1/2 second, its sensor cluster swept the vault and found the heat of 2 bodies and resolved them into a target. And in that 1/2 second, I did the thing it did not expect, the thing no soldier does, because a soldier brings the gun up and a station keeper brings up whatever is bolted to the wall. I hit the emergency dump on the junction housing. The main coolant junction was the throat of the spine I had bought 9 minutes for back on the deck, and it was carrying the whole pressurized load of a dying section. And when I cracked the emergency dump a meter from the frame's head, the vault filled in an instant with a roaring white jet of superheated coolant under enough pressure to strip paint off steel. It caught the frame full in the sensor cluster. It did not kill it. The armor was too good for that. But it blinded it, cooked its optics white, and sent it reeling back against the far wall, clawing at its own head, weapon firing wild into the ceiling of the chase, slugs screaming off the ring steel a hand's breadth over where Aelith lay pressed flat and small on the low side, exactly where I had put her, exactly out of the cone of fire. I went in under the jet. I had timed it. I knew how long the dump would run before the pressure bled out, and I spent every second of it. I came up inside the frame's guard where its blinded weapon could not bring me into focus, and I put the cutting bar through the actuator seam at its hip, and then the shoulder, the places I knew were soft because I fixed machines. And the warframe folded down into the dark with its optics still cooking and its weapon clattering away, and it did not get up. They do not get up when the legs go, neither would I. The dump bled dry, the roar cut off, the chase rang with sudden silence and steam, and the tick of cooling metal, and somewhere, far behind us, the pursuing frames had heard all of it and gone cautious, slowed, uncertain what had just happened to the one they sent around. I reached down into the low side of the vault and found her by feel, and she was there, flat and small and unhurt, exactly where I had told her to be, and when my hand found her shoulder, she gripped my wrist hard enough to bruise. "You used the ship again," she said. Her voice was not quite steady. "You did not fight it. You used the ship. You drowned a warframe in its own coolant in a space too small to fight in." "It's the only kind of fighting I'm any good at," I said. "I can't beat them. I can only beat them with the ship, and the ship is mine. I've told you that 3 times tonight. Maybe now you believe it." I got my arm back under her. The boat was 9 meters away. I could see the seam of light. "Up, we're almost there. Last 9 meters. You did the undignified thing perfectly. You made yourself small for a man who fixes valves, and it kept you alive. There's no shame in it, whatever your court would say." "My court," the Empress Regent said, as I drew her up out of the steam toward the light, "is going to learn a great many new things about shame and about its absence when I am off this ship. Beginning with the fact that the proudest thing I have done in 19 years was lie flat in a coolant vault and trust a human to drown a monster over my head. Crawl, Cole, to the light. I find I am very much looking forward to living. They could not crawl as fast as I could. That was the one mercy of the chase, and I had counted on it from the start. A Kale assault frame is a magnificent thing in a corridor and a clumsy thing in a 30-inch pipe, and they had to go single file, and they had to fold their weapons against their bodies. And every junction that I knew to slide through, they had to fight. I heard the first one wedge at the bend by the coolant junction, the same tight gap that had nearly stopped me, and I heard it grind and curse and start cutting, and cutting takes time. We bought meters with every junction, but they kept coming, because the fleet pays for the head, and there is no obstacle in the universe like a thing that has been promised money. I got us to the chase's end. I kicked the release on the bay panel, and it swung down, and we spilled out onto the deck of emergency boat Bay 9, and I will tell you what was waiting for us, because it is the part where the night nearly ended badly. The boat was there. A 6-seat lifeboat, squat and ugly and beautiful, racked and ready, and standing between it and us, in the gold-chased armor of the Throne Fleet Guard, helmet off, was a Serethi I knew by sight, Sub-Captain Oren, one of the 11 who had run, the youngest of the Shield Lord's men. He had not run far. He had run exactly this far, to exactly this boat, the one the gentry never used, the one a clever man would take if he wanted to be the last one off and the first one home. He had his sidearm up the moment we cleared the panel, and it was pointed at her, and his young face was sick with something I recognized, because I had worn it once myself in a corridor I was supposed to hold. "Don't," he said to me. "Don't, human, this isn't yours. Step away from her." "You came back for the boat," I said. I had her in my arms still, her blood down my front, her good eye open and fixed on him. "Not for her. For the boat. I came back to live." His weapon hand shook. "She's already dead. Look at her. She's already dead. She just hasn't stopped yet. And I am not dying on this ship for a corpse the KL are going to take anyway. The bounty. If I bring them the head, they let the lifeboats go. They broadcast it. Head for the fleet. Mercy for the rest. You think I want this? Step away. Let me do the only thing left that buys anybody anything." And there it was. The whole rotten arithmetic of her court in one frightened young man. She was worth more dead and delivered than alive and defended. 19 years of holding the line, and her own guard had done the math. Oren, her voice. Thin, but it cut through the bay like a blade through silk. The voice that had held 4 systems together, and the sub-captain flinched at it the way a dog flinches at a hand it has been struck by. You were 6 years old when you swore to me. I remember the ceremony. You could not reach the rail to kneel and your mother lifted you. Do you remember? Don't, he said. Don't do that. The voice. Don't. I am not doing the voice, she said. I am too tired for the voice. I am asking you a question. Do you remember who lifted you to the rail? My mother, he whispered. Your mother served 3 years in the spine galleries before she earned her commission, the Empress Regent said. In the corridors no one walks. With the people no one counts. Her good eye moved slowly, deliberately, to me, and then back to him. The kind of person who is still there when the corridors fill with fire. You have her armor, Oren. You do not yet have her spine. There is still time. There is, I think, exactly enough time and not 1 second more. The weapon wavered. I watched a boy do the hardest arithmetic of his life in the space of 3 breaths, with the sound of Kale cutting through metal growing in the chase behind us, and I did not move, because I have learned that there is a kind of moment you cannot win by force. You can only win it by letting the other person find the better part of themselves while you stand very still and give them room. He lowered the sidearm. Get her in the boat, Oren said hoarsely, and turned and brought his weapon up toward the chase mouth instead. I'll hold the panel. Go, go. Come with us, I said. There's room. There's room for 6, and there's 2 of you and a queen, and there's 8. Frames in that pipe. He racked his weapon's charge. Somebody has to be the one who stays at the panel. That's the job, isn't it? That's what she just told me. One of us learned it tonight from a human in coolant-stained coveralls, and I'd rather it be me than nobody. His jaw set. Tell them if anyone asks, tell them Oren didn't run. Tell them he ran exactly this far and then he stopped. I got her into the boat. I strapped her into the rack seat with hands that were steadier than they had any right to be, and she never took her good eye off the young guard at the panel, and as the canopy began to cycle down, she lifted one clawed hand and pressed it, flat to the inside of the glass, the way you would lay a hand on the brow of someone you were blessing, or someone you were saying goodbye to, and I do not know which it was, and I think it was both. The boat dropped, the bay fell away. The hollow crown spun above us, vast and burning along its spine, and somewhere in it a young man held a panel for as long as a young man can, and then the lifeboat's engine caught, and we were flung out into the cold, clean dark, away from the fleet, away from the head and the bounty and the throne, 2 people, and a wound and a long way still to go. The dark did not stay clean for long. I had the lifeboat tumbling on a cold arc with the engine cut, running silent, because a running engine is a candle in a dark room, and the room was full of Kale. For the better part of an hour it worked. The hollow crown burned away behind us, and the Kale fleet stayed clustered around the dying flagship like wolves around a downed thing, certain the head was somewhere in the wreck, and our little boat drifted out past the edge of their attention. Then the proximity panel lit, one slow amber bar, and I knew an hour of luck had just run out. Interceptor, I said. Kale. Single hull, fast pattern, sweeping the debris field. They figured out the head wasn't in the wreck. Now they're checking the boats. Elith lifted her head from the rack seat. The coagulant had bought her color back and clarity with it, and the gold eye went straight to the panel and read the contact the way she read. Everything, instantly into the bottom. It is running a search lattice. Methodical. They have decided I escaped, and they are sweeping every cold object in the field one at a time. She looked at me. How long until it reaches us? 4 minutes, maybe 5. It's checking the big debris first. We're small, we're last. I was already moving, pulling the engineering cowl off the boat's tiny drive housing, which means we've got 4 minutes and a queen who reads search lattices and a man who fixes ships. Tell me about that lattice. How does it decide what's a boat and what's a rock? She told me. Of course she told me. She had read the Kale Doctrine because she read everything, and she laid it out in 3 flat sentences while I had my hands inside the drive. The interceptor's sweep pinged for 2 things, residual drive heat and a returning transponder handshake. A cold rock gave back neither. A lifeboat full of survivors gave back both. The warm boat, the automatic distress transponder calling for help on every frequency it knew. The transponder, I said. That's what kills us. It's screaming for help on the Loyalist band, and the Kale can hear it screaming even if they can't. Read it. A boat that's calling for help is a boat with someone alive in it. Then silence it. If I silence it, the Loyalist fleet can't find us either. We go dark to the Kale and dark to the rescue both. I was already pulling the transponder leads, so we don't silence it. We move it. I did the thing I had been trained to do in the life I left in a drawer, and I did it with the queen watching and 4 minutes on the clock. I cut the transponder out of the boat, and I spliced it into a survival flare canister, and I set the canister's little maneuvering charge to burn cold and slow on a vector away from us, deeper into the debris field toward the big burning bones of the hollow crown. A transponder calling for help, drifting on a heat signature, straight back toward the wreck. To the Kale Interceptor's lattice, it would read as exactly what it was hunting, a survivor's boat, fleeing toward the cover of the wreck, and it would be 400 meters from us and getting farther. "You are giving them a ghost to chase," she said. There was something in her voice I had not heard before. Not surprise. She was past surprise with me, but a kind of grim delight. "You are making the head a lie and sending it away from us. I'm making the thing they want look like it's running. Because a thing that runs is a thing they'll chase. Same as Orin, same as your court. They can't help it. They're built for the chase." I sealed the cowl. "We're going to do the one thing nobody on a hunted boat ever does. We're going to stop. Full cold. No engine, no transponder, no heat. We're going to be a rock while the interceptor chases the flare back into the fire." I cut everything. The cabin lights died. The heaters died. The boat became a cold, dark stone tumbling in a debris field, and I pulled her out of the rack seat and into the lee of the drive housing, where what little residual heat there was would pool and hide our two warm bodies from the sweep, and I held her against me in the dark and the growing cold, and we waited. The interceptor came. I will not pretend I was calm. The amber bar on the dead panel was the only light, and it climbed as the Kale hull closed, and there was a stretch of maybe 90 seconds where the interceptor was close enough that I could feel the deep thrum of its drive through the hull, of our dead boat vibrating in the deck plate, in my teeth, in the bones of the Queen pressed against my chest. Its search beam swept past the canopy, a hard white bar of light that crawled across us and paused, and in that pause I stopped breathing, and I felt Aelith stop breathing too, the two of us absolutely still in a cold dark stone, while a thing that had been promised money for her skull decided what we were. The beam moved on. It had caught the flare. Out past the canopy, away toward the wreck, the survival transponder screamed its borrowed scream and trailed its cold false heat. And the interceptor's drive flared up bright and hard, and it peeled off after the ghost away from us, toward the burning bones of the ship she had ruled from, certain it was chasing a fleeing queen. We breathed. "That," the Empress Regent said, in the dark, in a voice that shook very slightly for the first time all night, "is twice now you have made my own death into a decoy and walked me out the side of it. The wound on the deck, the flare just now. You keep taking the thing that is coming for me and pointing it somewhere else." "It's the same trick both times," I said. "It's the only trick I've got. You can't outshoot the thing that's coming. You can only make it look at the wrong place while you move the thing that matters." I felt her shiver, and I pulled the thermal sheet from the locker one-handed and got it around her, and I did not let go of her. Cold's the enemy now. We stay dark another 20 minutes till that interceptor's well clear. Then I bring the heat up slow, and we put the transponder back and call the loyalists. We're past the worst of it. The hard part's behind us. Is it? Her good eye found mine in the faint amber glow. "You have spent this entire night telling me the hard part is behind us, on the deck, in the chase, in the boat bay. Now here. I have begun to suspect, Cole Vantry, that you say it is behind us precisely so that the person you are carrying will believe there is a forward to crawl toward. It is the kindest lie I have ever been told, and you have told it to me 4 times tonight, and I am going to let you keep telling it, because it is working, and because no one has ever bothered to lie to me in a kind direction before." "It's not a lie," I said. "It's a forecast. There's a difference. A lie is when you don't believe it. I believe it every time I say it. That's the trick to the whole night. You have to actually believe the forward is there, or you can't carry anybody toward it." I tightened the sheet around her. 20 minutes. Then the heat. Then home. Believe it with me, it carries better when there are 2. The lifeboat had a medical locker, and the locker had Cerethi-rated coagulant, and I used all of it. She talked me through her own body in the flat voice of a woman who had read the field manuals because she read everything, telling me which membrane I would find under the muscle wall, how thick it would be, what color meant trouble. I worked with my hands and listened with my whole attention, and somewhere in the second hour the dark line stopped coming to the corner of her mouth, and the gray under the slate blue warmed by a half shade, and I let myself believe for the first time that the hour the wound had given her had quietly become a day, and a day was a thing you could work with. "You've done this before," she said. She was watching my hands. "Closed a body. You have the patience for it. Most warriors do not. They open, they do not close. I told you another life. I left it in a drawer. You keep saying that." Her good eye, clearer now, steady on me in the dim cabin glow. "The drawer. The life you left. You leave it in a drawer, and then every hour of tonight you take one more thing out of it. The wound craft, the soldier's seam in the throat plate, the patience, the staying. There is not very much left in that drawer, Cole Vantry. I think you have unpacked it entirely in front of me in one night. I didn't answer that right away. Outside the canopy, the stars wheeled slowly as the boat tumbled on its long arc. I had set the beacon to a frequency the Cyrethi Loyalist Squadron would know, and the Kale would not. But I had no way to know who would reach us first, or whether anyone would, and I did not tell her that, because she had enough to carry. There was a station, I said finally. I don't know why I told her. Maybe because she had told me hers in the chase, and a thing like that asks to be answered. Border listening post. I held the maintenance section, the spine, same as here, it's always the spine. We got hit. The order came to pull back to the core and seal it, and there was a kid in the far gallery, a tech green slower than the rest, and the seal was closing, and I had a choice between making the seal and going back for the kid. I looked at my hands. I made the seal. It was the right call. It saved 40 people. The manual would tell you I did everything right. The kid's name was Pell. He was 19. I have done everything right exactly once in my life, and it is the thing I cannot live next to. She was quiet a long moment. So tonight, she said. When the Shield Lord said leave her, the deck is lost. I heard it in two voices at once, I said. His and the one from the station. And I decided that whatever the manual said, I was not going to make the seal again. Not this time. Not with someone still on the wrong side of it. I met her eye. You weren't a queen to me on that deck, Aelith. You were the kid in the far gallery. You were Pell. I stayed for Pell. You just happened to be where he was. I had not meant it to land the way it landed. I had meant it as a confession, a small, ugly, true thing about a man who fixes machines because he could not fix the one thing that mattered. But she heard something in it I had not put there on purpose, and her good eye filled, not spilling, she would not spill, but bright and full and held, and her clawed hand came across the narrow cabin and closed over mine where it rested on the medical kit. No, she said. Listen to me because I am going to give you something and I do not give things. You did not stay for a ghost. A man who stays for a ghost lets the living one die to pay the dead one back. You did not let me die. You crawled 41 meters with my blood in your sleeve, and you said my name as though I might answer. That is not paying a debt to a boy named Pell. Her grip tightened. That is a man who learned, from losing Pell, exactly how much one life is worth, and decided to spend everything he had so that the next one would not be lost. You did not stay for the dead. You stayed because you finally understood what the dead are worth. Those are not the same thing. Do you hear me? They are not the same thing. I had spent 11 years being unable to put down a station I sealed correctly, and a wounded alien queen took it off my back in a tumbling lifeboat in 4 sentences, and I had to look away at the wheeling stars for a moment before I could trust my own voice. You're a hard woman to do a favor for, I said roughly. I am the hardest woman in 4 systems to do a favor for, she agreed, and there it was again, the dry, fierce ghost of a smile. And you have done me 3 tonight without asking, and I find I have stopped counting what I am owed, which has not happened to me since I was a girl. I do not know who I am when I am not counting, Cole. You should know that about what you have done. You have made me a stranger to myself. That's all right, I said. I'll introduce you. She seems like someone worth knowing. The beacon panel chimed. I had it on the loyalist frequency, and the chime meant a contact, and my stomach went tight because a contact this far out could be exactly one of 2 things, and only one of them ended with us alive. I pulled the return signal up. For 3 long seconds it was only noise, and then it resolved into a recognition handshake, an old one, a fleet loyal squadron sign, and under it, threaded into the carrier wave the way only a flagship's command suite could thread it, a single repeated phrase in Court Cyrethi. She read it before I did. I watched her read it. I watched the most powerful woman in 4 systems go absolutely still, and then I watched her good eye close, and a single line of wet track down the burned side of her face, the only tear I would ever see her let fall. What does it say? I asked. It says, the Empress Regent of the Cyrethi whispered, the crown is alive. The fleet has rallied to the loyalist signal. They are coming. She opened her eye. It says, bring her home. The loyalist signal said they were coming, but coming is not the same as here, and the dark between the two nearly took her from me anyway. It happened in the last hour of the drift, with the rescue squadron's drive flares already visible as cold points growing against the stars. She had been talking. She would not stop talking. I think because she had decided that as long as she was talking, she was choosing to be alive, and choosing was the one power no wound could take from her. And then mid-sentence she stopped, and her good eye lost its focus, and the dressing at her side went dark and warm under my hand again. The membrane had given. The coagulant had held it as long as a body in a tumbling boat would let it, and now with rescue an hour out, it had let go. And I had used all the coagulant already, and there was none left in the locker. No, I said, no, not now, not with them in sight. Aelith, stay with me. She was very far away. The gold eye drifted toward my voice and found it and held on, barely. "Cole," she said, thick and slow. "I think, the forward you keep promising, I think I cannot see it from here. Then I'll see it for both of us." I had no coagulant. I had my hands and pressure, and the one thing the locker still held, which was a roll of pressure tape meant for hull breaches, and I made a choice that the manual would not have liked, and that the man I left in a drawer would have made in a heartbeat. I packed the wound with the sterile field dressing torn open flat, and I sealed it under hull tape, hard, a pressure seal across her side the way you seal a breach in a hull, because a body is just a vessel, and a vessel that is losing its pressure has to be sealed, and I did not have time for it to be gentle. She made the thin hiss. Even then, even half-gun, she would not cry out. Her court had taught her that a queen who cries out has shown the room a seam, and 19 years had welded the lesson into her so deep that she carried it down into the dark with her. "Don't do that," I told her, working. "Don't hold it in for me. There's no room here. There's no court. It's just us and a boat. You're allowed to make a sound. Nobody's counting. I promise you nobody is counting." And the Empress Regent of the Serethi, who had not let a room see her flinch in 19 years, with rescue an hour out and her own blood under a hull patch, let go of one small broken sound against my shoulder. Not a scream, not a sob, just a single low note of pain finally permitted. And it undid something in her that all my staying had not yet reached. The eye that had stayed dry on the burning deck and dry in the chase and dry through the false death of the flare spilled over at last, 2 slow tracks down the slate blue, not from the pain but from being, for the first time in 2 decades, in a place small enough and safe enough to let the pain be seen. "There," I said, sealing the last of the tape. "There, I've got you. The pressure's holding. The forward's still there, I can see it. It's an hour out and it's got dry flares the size of moons. You don't have to see it. I'll carry the seeing. You just have to keep breathing and you're allowed to do it loud." "No one," she whispered, "has ever told me I was allowed to make the sound." "Well, you are. On this boat with me, for the rest of however long we've got, you're allowed to make the sound. That's the deal. That's the whole deal. You carried 4 systems for 19 years without ever letting one of them hear you, and I'm telling you that with me you don't have to. Not because you're weak. Because I'd rather hear it than have you weld it down into a seam that splits you open later." I got my arm around her, careful of the patch side, and held her against me in the cold. "Breathe loud. Bleed slow. Watch the flares with me. They're coming. Bring her home," the signal said. So we bring her home. Stay loud and stay with me, and we bring her home. She breathed. Loud, ragged, permitted against my shoulder, with the rescue squadron's flares growing in the canopy, and her blood under a hull patch and a human's arm around her that wanted nothing. And somewhere in that last hour the membrane held under the seal, and the body chose to keep its pressure, and the forward I had promised 4 times turned out, the 5th time, to be real. "When I am whole again," she said much later, "when the flares had become ships, and the ships had become a recovery bay full of light," her voice steadier, her hand finding mine in the brightening dark, "I am going to make a law, a small one. It will not be in any of the great codes. It will be a thing the spine crew know, and the court does not. It will say that on every ship of my people, the one who keeps the air moving is permitted to make the sound. That no one who holds the corridors, no one walks, is required to weld their pain into a seam. You will not see it written anywhere grand, but it will be there in the parts of the ship no one walks, and every soul who keeps us breathing will know that a queen once in a dying boat was taught by a human that she was allowed to make the sound, and made it law so that they would never have to learn it as late as she did. That," I said, "might be the best law anyone's ever made." "It is the only one I have ever made," the Empress Regent of the Serethi said. "For the people no one counts, and it is the first thing I will do when I am home, because of a man who would have stayed for the cook." The Loyalist flagship was called the Steadfast Vale, and when its recovery bay swallowed our little boat, I had been awake for 19 hours and I was holding her hand, and I did not let go of it when the canopy cracked and the noise and the light came flooding in. They came in a wave, medics first, which was right, and then officers, and then at the back, the gentry and the advisors and the court that had survived, the men who counted. The medics had her on a gurney in under a minute, fast and competent, and I let them take her, because letting go is also a kind of staying, and a man who will not let the medics work has not learned the hard lesson I learned at the listening post. But she would not let go of my hand. She held it across the gurney rail with that clawed grip that had peeled the gold from her own throne, and she said something to the lead medic in Court Serethi, low and absolute, and the medic looked at me and then nodded and did not separate us. "What did you tell her?" I asked. "That you are with me," the Empress Regent said, "and that anyone who tries to put a corridor between us will spend the rest of a short career counting rivets in the spine galleries. Walk beside me, Cole. I am about to do the part of my work that I am actually good at, and I want a witness who knows what it costs to get here. So I walked beside the gurney through the Loyalist flagship, in my coolant-stained coveralls, my sleeves stiff with her dried blood, the only human in a corridor full of gold, and the court fell in around us, and I watched their faces do the arithmetic. I knew that arithmetic now. I had heard it in Oren's voice in the boat bay. She's already dead, she just hasn't stopped yet. They had all done that math 8 hours ago. They had written her off, every one of them, and made their plans for the gap, and now here she was, alive, on a gurney, holding the hand of a maintenance worker, with her good eye open and clear and moving from face to face, and I watched each of them understand, one at a time, that the Empress Regent had survived the one night that was supposed to finish her, and that she had seen from the floor exactly who ran. The Shield Lord was there. He had made it to the steadfast veil ahead of us, of course. The ones who run are always early. He stood at the front of the court in his unmarked gold, his helmet under his arm, his face arranged into grief and relief, and he stepped forward as the gurney approached with his hand to his chest in the old salute and the words already in his mouth. My Empress, thank every star. When the deck was lost, I tried to reach you. I fought to stop. She did not raise her voice. She had told me in the chase she was too tired for the voice, and she was, and she did not need it. The single flat word stopped him as though she had put a wall in front of him. You will not finish that sentence, the Empress Regent said, because I was on the floor of that deck, Shield Lord, and I heard the sentence you finished there. I heard you say leave her. I heard you say anyone who stays dies with her. And then I watched a man who is not sworn to me, who is owed nothing by me, who did not even know what his own contract said, put his body between me and a Kale boarding party because he decided on his own that I was a person worth not abandoning. Her gold eye held the Shield Lord and did not blink. You were my father's man. You were my grandfather's man. And in 19 years, you never once learned the thing a human station keeper knew in his bones before he knew my name. So, here is the recognition you have earned. Bo. The corridor went silent. My Empress, not to me. Her hand tightened on mine. She turned her ruined face, deliberately, the burned cheek and the swollen eye and all, toward me, and she said it again. Clear enough for every soul in that corridor to carry it for the rest of their lives. To him, Bo before him, the one who stayed. You will bow to the human in the coveralls, Shield Lord, here now, in front of the court that ran, or you will spend what remains of your service explaining to the Loyalist fleet why you could not. I want to tell you I handled it with grace. I didn't. I am a man who fixes coolant valves, and I stood in that corridor with my dead friend's lesson finally lifted off my back and a queen's blood on my sleeve, and I had no idea what to do with my face while the most powerful court in 4 systems turned, one rank at a time, to look at me. It started with the medics, who had seen the wound and knew what closing it had taken. Then the young officers, then slowly, hating it, the gentry. And last of all, with his jaw working and his early running pride dying hard in his throat, the Shield Lord himself went down, not low, not gladly, but down on one knee in front of a maintenance worker because the woman on the gurney had made the floor of his choices visible to everyone and there was nowhere left to stand. That's enough, I said quietly, to her, not to him. That's enough. You've made the point. He doesn't have to. He does, she said. Not for you. You do not need it. That is precisely why it must be you, for them. Her eye swept the kneeling court. They will remember which one of you they bowed to. They will remember it was not the gold. It was the one who stayed. And the next time the deck is lost and the order comes to run, perhaps one of them will remember a man in coveralls and do the harder thing. She looked back at me, and the fierceness gentled into something I had no defense against at all. That is how a queen fixes a court, Cole, one witness at a time. You taught me that in a coolant chase. I am only doing your job back to you. The kneeling did not end the matter. I thought it would. I thought a queen bending her own Shield Lord to a maintenance worker was the largest thing that could happen in a corridor, and that after it the court would file away and I could go find a valve to fix and a quiet place to shake. I was wrong about that. The way I was wrong about most things involving how the Serethi handle recognition. Because the kneeling was a fact now, and facts travel on a ship. By the time the medics had her settled in the recovery bay and I had been allowed, after an argument I did not win and did not want to win, to sit in the chair beside the door, the story had gone the length of the steadfast veil twice. It went the way true things go on a warship, not announced, just known suddenly by everyone. The galley crew knew. The drive deck crew knew. The Loyalist Marines who had retaken the boat bays knew. And one by one, across the days that followed, they found reasons to walk past the recovery bay where the human in the coveralls sat, and they looked at me, and a thing happened that I did not have a name for and still do not entirely. The first was a drive technician, Serethi, old, with the burn-scared hands of someone who had spent 40 years in the parts of ships no one walks. She stopped in the corridor outside the bay and looked at me for a long moment, and then she did something with her hand against her chest, not the court salute, the gentry salute, but something older and plainer, a tap of two fingers over the sternum that I would later learn is what spine crew give each other, below the notice of the officers, when one of them has done the work and not run. She did not say anything. She did the two-finger tap and she moved on, and I sat there with my throat tight, because it was the first time in 9 months on the fleet that anyone had treated me as one of theirs. After that, they all did it. Every spine crew Sarethi who passed gave me the two fingers over the sternum. Not the gentry, not the officers, the ones who fix things. They had heard that a man who fixed things had carried the queen out through the corridors. No one walks. And they had claimed me, quietly, as a thing that belonged to them and not to the gold. I told her about it on the 4th day, when the fever had broken and she could sit up and was already, against every medical instruction, reading fleet reports off a slate balanced on her knees. They tapped their chests at me, I said, the spine crew, 2 fingers. I don't know what to do back. She set the slate down. For a moment, the ruthless queen rebuilding an empire from a recovery bed went away, and there was only the woman from the chase, the one who had told me true things in the dark. It is the oldest salute the Sarethi have, she said, older than the throne. Before there were crowns, there were ships, and before there were ships, there were the long generation vessels that crossed the dark to reach these worlds, and on those vessels the most honored were not the captains. They were the ones who kept the air moving and the water clean and the spine from rupturing across 100 years of dark. The 2 fingers over the heart means I see who keeps us breathing. The court forgot it. The court has had crowns long enough to forget that the crown was always carried by the ones who keep the air moving. She looked at me. You should tap back. 2 fingers, it means I see you too. They will weep, some of them if you do. They have given that salute to each other in the dark for 1,000 years and never once received it from above. And to them now, you are from above. You are the man the queen bowed her shield lord to. I'm not from above, I'm one of them. I'm spine crew. That's the whole point. I know, she said softly. That is exactly why you must tap back. The above and the below have been 2 countries on every ship of my people since. Before my line was crowned, and tonight a man crossed between them carrying a queen, and the crossing is the thing, Cole. The crossing is what they are saluting. Tap back. Be the proof that the 2 countries can be one quarter. So I did. The next spine crew who passed, a young rating, barely more than a cadet, who gave me the 2 fingers shyly and started to hurry on. I lifted my hand and gave it back to her, 2 fingers over the sternum. I see you too. And the girl stopped dead in the corridor, and her eyes went bright, and she pressed her own hand flat over her heart and stood there a moment unable to move, and then she went on with her shoulders squared in a way they had not been before. Elith had told me they would weep, some of them. She was right. She was right about her own people the way I was right about Valve's. The Shield Lord did not come back. He had been given a posting at the rim, a real one, not a punishment dressed as one, because she had decided that breaking a man entirely teaches the court, less than leaving him alive and diminished where everyone can measure the distance he fell. But the rest of the court came over those days in 1s and 2s to the recovery bay, and they had all done the math 8 hours into a siege and written her off, and they all knew that she knew, and they came to take her measure now that she was alive and find out what it was going to cost them. She made each of them, before they left, walk past my chair and look at me. She did not make them bow. One bow had done its work, and a thing repeated loses its edge. And she understood edges better than anyone alive. She just made them look. This is Cole Vantry, she would say in the flat, tired voice every time, to every one of them. He kept the spine of the hollow crown for 9 months, and none of you learned his name. He stayed on the deck you ran from. Look at him. The next time deck is lost, I want you to see his face before you decide which way to run. And one by one, the men who counted looked at the man who stayed and filed the face away, and went out changed by exactly the amount a person can be changed by being shown, plainly, the floor of their own choices. You're rebuilding the whole court around one night, I said to her, after the last of them had gone. I am rebuilding the whole court around one man. She said, who showed me in one night the single thing 19 years of ruling had not. That the floor of the ship is the foundation of the throne, and I had been standing on a throne my whole life without once going down to see who held it up. She picked the slate back up. Now hush. I am redrawing the line of succession and the treaty office and the entire doctrine of who my fleet is permitted to abandon, and I would like the man who taught it to me to be in the room while I do it, even if he only fixes the lights. She did not die. I want to put that plainly, because for a long time I had assumed that the people I cared about on the wrong side of a sealed door did not get to come back, and it took me weeks aboard the Steadfast Veil to believe that this one had. The wound was bad and the recovery was slow, and there were 2 days in the middle where the medics would not meet my eyes. And I sat outside the bay through both of those days in my cleaned coveralls, because she had asked me to stay, and I had stopped being a man who left. On the third day, the lead medic came out and told me the membrane had held and the fever had broken. And then, because she was Serethi and precise, she added that the Empress had been asking for me by my first name without the title, which she said she had never once heard the Empress do for anyone, and that I should know what that meant even if I were too human to read it. I read it fine. She rebuilt the court from a recovery bed, and I watched her do it, and it was the most ruthless and the most patient thing I have ever seen. The bounty inside her own house, she found who had raised it. It was an under-minister of the treaty office, a quiet man who had decided 19 years of stability was worth less to him than the gap her death would open and the share he had been promised in it by the Kyle. She did not have him killed. She had him brought to the recovery bay, and she made him stand at the foot of the bed where the medics had stood, and she told him, in the flat, tired voice, that she had survived the night he had sold because of a man he had never noticed, who fixed the parts of the ship men like him never walked through. Then she stripped him of office and rank and name and put him on a freighter to the rim with the clothes he stood in, alive, to live a long time knowing exactly how small the thing was that had undone all his arithmetic. Killing him teaches no one, she told me afterward. Letting the court watch a man who counted lose to a man who stayed, that teaches everyone. She found Oren's name too. There was no body to recover. The hollow crown had broken along the spine I bought 9 minutes for and burned the rest of the way, and the boy who held the panel had held it, the loyalist data said, for 11 minutes against 8 frames, which is 4 minutes longer than any of them should have lived. She had his mother's old commission record pulled, the one from the spine galleries, and she had a new line entered above her son's name in the Throne Fleet roll in Court Serethi, and she made me read the translation. It said, Oren Vale, who ran exactly this far, and then he stopped. She had taken his own words off my report of that night and made them his epitaph in the official record of the Empire. You told me he asked for that, she said, that it be written down somewhere, even if the only record was a memory. I have a better record than your memory. He will be in the roll for 1,000 years. The ones who run are forgotten in a season. The ones who stop get 1,000 years. The Loyalist fleet retook the border in the months that followed. The Kale, having bet everything on a head they never collected, broke against a queen who was supposed to be dead, and a court that had, for once, learned the harder thing. I am not a strategist, I fixed what broke. By then there was a great deal of the empire that broke, and a queen who had decided that the man she trusted to find the breaks before they killed anyone was the human in the coveralls. And so I went where she went, and I kept the spine of the new flagship, and I was no longer the only human anyone failed to speak to. They spoke to me now. They had all bowed to me in a corridor once, and a Serethi does not forget who they have bowed to. On the day the border treaties were re-signed, she stood for the first time without the cane, in the great window gallery of the new ship, with the retaken worlds turning gold and blue below, and the whole court behind her in their ranks, and I stood where I had taught her the ones who matter stand, at the edge, near the maintenance panel, where I could watch the room and reach the breaks. She found me there. She always found me there. She crossed the gallery in front of the entire court, slowly, on her own feet, the burn scar pale now along her cheekbone, and the eye healed but clouded. The marks of the night she did not run from worn openly because she had decided they were not shame but record. She stopped in front of me. She did not take my hand for the room's benefit. She had stopped performing for rooms. She took it because she wanted to, the same clawed grip from the throne and the chase and the gurney, and she looked up at me with the gold eye that had weighed emperors and found, somewhere in a coolant chase, one honest arm. They want me to give you a title, she said. A rank, lands. The court has prepared 3 offers. They cannot understand a man who is owed nothing standing beside the throne, so they wish to make you a man who is owed something. It would make them comfortable. I don't want a title, I said. I know. I told them so. I told them the entire value of you is that you stayed when there was nothing to be owed, and that to pay you now would be to unmake the only thing in 19 years I have trusted completely. Her grip tightened. So I refused all 3 offers, and then I made one of my own, which is not a payment because you cannot pay a man like you can only ask. Stay, Cole, not for the throne, not for the fleet, not for what you would be owed. The gold eye held mine, wet but composed, in front of the whole court that had once written her off and now could not look away. Stay the way you stayed on the deck. For the person, not the crown. I have a great many corridors no one walks and a great many years left to walk them, and I would rather not walk them as a stranger to myself again. Stay and say my name the way you said it in the dark, and I will spend what is left of a hard life learning to be the woman someone stays for. That is the offer. It is the only one I have ever made that costs me everything and promises nothing. The court was silent. The retaken worlds turned below. I had spent 11 years unable to put down a door I sealed correctly, and a year learning from a queen that I had finally understood what the dead are worth, and I knew exactly one thing for certain in the whole turning galaxy, and I said it the way I had said it on the burning deck, plain and human and final. I won't leave you here, I told her. Wherever this goes, you're not going alone. I told you that on the deck when you were nobodies anymore, and the floor was on fire, and it was true then, and there was nothing to be owed then either. It's the same promise. It hasn't got bigger because the room got grander. It was always the whole of it. Elith, I said, I'm not going anywhere. Say it back to me in 10 years. And the Empress Regent of the Cerethi, who had not let herself be carried since they bore her husband past her, who had decided it was safer to need nothing than to be owed, closed her clouded eye, and turned her face up into the gold light of the worlds she had saved, and said my name back to me in front of the whole kneeling history of her. House Cole, she said, in 10 years, and in 10 after that. The ones we do not count are the ones who do not run. Her hand found mine and stayed. Welcome home.